Hello and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to talk about how you can use QuickBooks to file your self-assessment tax return.
I told him I can be a fighter if you want. I'll be there to catch you if you fall. I can make it brighter when it starts. I told him I would do it all for you, and I know you do it for me.
Hello, my name's Aaron Patrick. I'm a chartered accountant, certified UK trainer, and also that QuickBooks chap. Now, one of the most requested comments I keep getting is basically trying to explain to people the difference between QuickBooks Self-Employed versus QuickBooks Online. We did a whole video about that the other day, but one of the things we learned more than anything, that one of the biggest drawbacks of using QuickBooks Online, despite its many benefits, is the fact that you can't file your self-assessment tax return directly in the product. So I asked you guys to comment, like, subscribe to that video, and if I got enough of the feedback, my aim was to come and show you guys exactly how to file a tax return using the information from QuickBooks, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So imagine the scenario: you're loving QuickBooks, you're loving the fact that you can connect your bank account up, you can use stock migration, you can do all those fancy things in there, and you're starting to get to grips with how the benefits are starting to work. But when it comes to filing your tax return, you're going to need to take that information that's in QuickBooks, you're going to need to take it out of there and put it into a tax return. Now, before I go any further, there's two ways of getting that done. The first way is DIY, so you guys doing it yourself, and that's what this video is all about. The second way, just so you're fully aware, is passing it on to an accountant like myself. If you pass it over to an accountant, we will do things a little bit differently. So what we do is we don't just take the information you've put into QuickBooks and just post it, but we analyze the information, we create what's called a set of accounts, we give you a set of accounts, and then that set of accounts forms the basis of what goes onto your tax return. So using an accountant gives you the confidence that everything's been put in the right place, everything's complete, and also make sure that you're claiming for everything. But I completely understand it. In times like these, sometimes you just need to DIY it yourself, and that's what this video is all about. So if you've chosen not to go down the accountant route and you've chosen to do it yourself, this is the video for you. Your first step before you go anywhere is making sure that every bit of information in QuickBooks is correct. So let's have a look now at exactly what I mean by that. Okay, so I've logged into QuickBooks, and in QuickBooks itself, we've got all of the information that's gone through. Now, for me to have confidence that this information is correct, there's a few things I need to look at. The first and most important thing you need to look at is you need to jump into your banking screen, and just like we looked at on a separate video, we need to make sure everything's reconciled. Now, you can understand from here, and you can see straight away if I've got work to do, because remember, if there's differences between the two numbers, that's going to indicate that there's an issue. But also, if I need to go and look at certain things, if I look at my reconciliation, remember, I go to account history. That gives me a breakdown of that account, and then I use the reconcile button in the top right hand corner, and I can go from there. Now, the most important thing is making sure that your reconciliation date here is past whatever year end or period end you're doing. Now, for most of you, the most simplistic way of doing it, and this is when you've set your self-assessment up, is that you've set your self-assessment to go to the 31st of March, which is pretty much the year end, which is HMRC's personal year end. So using the 31st of March is going to make your life easier. If you use any other year end though, bear in mind at this stage you've got to adapt it to whatever your year end is going to be, and you've got to make sure that you're running to at least past that particular year end. So for me, in this one, I would want to make sure that everything's reconciled up until the 31st of March 2020. If I have a reconciliation date up until the 31st of March 2020, I know I'm good, and I know I've got everything all set up for my banks. Well, don't just look at your proper bank, make sure you go through all of the banks that you've got here. Pretty much every item that comes on this list here, I would recommend that you go in and make sure you're happy with. So cash on hand, you're going to make sure that whatever money you've got in a tin at that point in time is correct. Best thing to do is add up the money you've got now and reconcile it as at now. If you can reconcile it for today, chances are it was okay back then. You're going to be doing credit cards if you've added your credit card. Again, you want to make sure you get a credit card statement out, get that correct. Any loans you may have for your business, make sure that's correct. Basically, you're going to go through this and use this as a bit of a checklist. Go through each of the accounts, making sure you're happy that everything's been posted for you. Now, there's going to be some items on here that may be a little bit complicated, but if they're complicated and you don't know what they are, either reach out for someone to ask them what the answer should be, or you may want to consider that if you're not comfortable with what it relates to, then it shouldn't be there. This list here should all be items that you can wholeheartedly reconcile. Those items are the ones you're putting to paper to say that you're happy they're right. There's a bit of a golden rule in accountancy, and that's if we can reconcile all of our what we call our balance sheet accounts, if we can get each one of them spot on and we can get them right as at our year end, that means in general our accounts have to be correct. Because as an accountant and from HMRC's point of view, as accounts point of view, they're all based on this concept called double entry. Double entry basically means that once you have one transaction in, then we have to have an opposite transaction that meets it. Therefore, if you reconcile what we call our balance sheet items, then that must mean we have everything included correctly. That means the other entry must be correct. Now, there might be some presentation issues, or there might be, one item's posted against one and offsetting, all that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, if our balance sheet's correct, then everything else must be okay. So your first thing and your first point of call is going through that reconciliation list and making sure you can reconcile everything that's there. The only one that could cause you a bit of issue is going to be your drawings figure. Now remember, your drawings figure is basically the money you've taken out. So if you have got a drawings figure there and you're asked to reconcile it, at that point, really what you're trying to do is you're just going to use that as an opportunity to put the end date. So I would put 31st for 20, start reconciling. And for now, I'm just going to put a 0 in for now because I know that's not correct. And then my job is to go through this list and make sure all of these are personal expenses. Once I'm happy with that, I can tick each item to say that I'm accepting. So I would go through and tick, 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 tick. Once I'm happy with that, then all I need to do, edit info, and from the edit info, I can change it to whatever the figure should have been. And then I put my figure in, press save, and I get that my screen tick. Remember that drawings should actually represent the money you've taken out of the business to live on personally, but also it's going to represent some transactions you may have paid for personally or any items like that. So just go through that list and make sure that all the items there feel like they're right and feel like that's how they should be. Okay, now we've checked that the information in QuickBooks should be correct. Our next port of call is making sure we're happy with the information we're going to extract from it. Then we need to make sure the information that we've extracted from it is right on the tax return. So the information we're going to include is under your report section, business overview, and profit and loss. And what I would recommend is looking at the profit and loss by month, this one here. When you look at your profit and loss by month, you then want to do your tax year. So you can do 1st of the 4th, 19 in this case, to 31st of the 3rd, 20, and run report. The reason I like profit and loss by month is because it's easier for you to see if there's any mistakes or any issues or anything else. This report here, now that you've got your balance sheet items, right, is basically going to be the information, how that information is going to translate into the tax return. So we want to go through and make sure we're happy with all the categories and making sure we're happy that they're all correct and that's how they should be. So for example here, I'm going through and I'm looking at all these different transactions. At the top area is my income section. So I'm making sure that these income items are right. Anything like negative items or stuff like that, I want to look at because there's probably going to be an issue there that I need to look into. So for me to look into it, I literally click on the item itself. It takes me to the transactions, and then it even gives me the options to click into it even further if I need to make an adjustment. So from that one report, I can keep utilizing that report to make sure that I've got everything in the right place. And if I do need to make adjustments, I can literally go on these transactions and adjust them accordingly. Your next item is just going through making sure the categories make sense as well. And then basically you're coming to a point where you're happy that everything's there. This report here is something you want to save. So I would go to the right hand side here and I'd export it to either Excel or PDF and save it somewhere that you're going to be able to have access to. Remember, HMRC have rules regarding keeping client data, so make sure you're in line with those rules and put it somewhere so that you can get to it if you need to. And the other reports I like to do is profit and loss by comparison. Profit and loss by comparison gives me the chance to put those date ranges in the top. Now this report's pretty useful because it's going to show me if there's anything in the previous period. And if I did have data in the previous period, that's a good litmus test for me to make sure that I've got everything included correctly. So if I had a rent figure in one and had a different rent figure in the other, can I justify why there's a difference between the two, or have I made a mistake? Again, I would take this item and I'd export it as a PDF or Excel, and that's one of the ones I'd save as well. Finally, what I would tend to want to do is just a breakdown of all my transactions. And one of the things you can do that to make your life easier is in the company cog in the top right hand corner, you have the tool section and you have export data. So if I'm about to take some data that I'm about to prepare a set of accounts for, in your case, do a tax return on, you want to keep that data to one side, again, just in case HMRC want to ask you where you got your information from. What I tend to do is I go through and I pick the last year, I'll make sure my years are correct. Remember, you can change this information if you need to. And then you have the option at the bottom here to tick all of these items and export to Excel. And that's going to give you something you can save, put somewhere safe, back it up, and that's going to be what's going to form the basis of your tax return. Okay, now we're confident in the data. Now keep an eye on the channel because we're going to go through lots of ways in which you can make sure data's been put into QuickBooks correctly in the first place. Then when it comes to making sure you're confident in it, you can make sure as well. And at some point, I'm also going to do a bit more of a deep dive into what to look out for in terms of errors. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that one. Okay, next, you've got that report. You now need to take that report and put it into HMRC. So the report I tend to use the most is going to be that profit and loss by month set to your year end. So making sure that your year is being completed. Again, that report to me is the most useful because it's going to show you what has happened on a month by month basis. So this is your other chance to go through when you put into your tax return to make sure you're happy that each of those transactions are correct. If you're going through that profit and loss and you realize there are mistakes and there are issues, again, I've got loads of videos on the channel on how to correct them and how to get them right. But basically, at this stage, you're going to need to be confident that that information is how you want it to be presented. And what you want to be presented more than anything is it makes sense to you, and then that you can then take that information and extract it into your tax return. As a callback to the beginning of the video when I talked about the two ways of doing it, where you have yourself as DIY or using an accountant to do it for you, this is where the accountant thing completely different. They don't just take a report from QuickBooks, but they generate for you a proper set of accounts that have also been certified by that accountant, which gives confidence to HMRC that it's been completed. Also, most accountants, especially myself, won't even just give you a set of accounts, but we will take that information, we'll put it in a tax return, and we will file it on your behalf. So remember, if this is the bit that looks daunting, do think about reaching out. Okay, so I've got my information that I want to put on my tax return. I'm going to basically keep an eye on this view here, where I've got my income at the top, my cost of sales, and then I've got all my expenses categories down here. Now, in front of me now is an example of what a tax return will look at. The first part of it is all about tailoring your return. Now, when it comes to tailoring your return, you just need to go through each of the questions and make sure you're happy with your yes or no answer. The point of tailoring the return is so that HMRC then gives you the right information, the right forms to fill out to complete the tax return based on your personal needs. So go through that question and go through and answer them honestly, and then you'll be able to make sure that your return is properly answered. Just an example of the tailoring, if I jump into change your tailored return just here, then you'll see it's asking me questions. Now, the most important question for you is going to be this here. Was your turnover more than 1,000 in form of self-employment? Please check help. And it's the yes that you need to. That's going to tell HMRC you've had self-employment in the year, and that's what you're about to record. Remember to keep an eye on those other questions though. If you've had part employment, if you've had a directorship, if you had a rental income, all of those other questions that are on the form, like here, were you a director, did you receive UK from land or property, and were you employed, are going to be the main question. When you do say yes to self-employed, you then need to say how many businesses you've had, and you're going to say what your business name is. Now, your business name can be something internal for yourself to understand, or it could be what you trade as. So maybe your eBay store selling name, whatever it's going to be. Okay, now you've set your tailoring, the rest of the return is now tailored directly for you and you only. So it's going to base on the answers you've already given. So for example here, I now have my self-employed section and my one self-employed section that I put on, which was reselling, and I get to enter self-employment details here. So literally I click on this transaction, I let them know if my annual turnover is 85k or more. Now this is important. If your turnover is over the 85k element, then HMRC are going to want to know more information. They're going to want it to be broken down more. Personally, if it was me, if you are over the 85k, and remember that's turnover, not profit, if you're over that 85k, that's when I would personally really consider an accountant, because really you want something that's going to back those figures up. You want a certified set of accounts to go with them. If you are still doing it yourself, you can still follow on from this video, but just be a little bit careful. You're going to have to break your stuff down into a lot more information, and also you're not just going to be able to put the profit and loss element in that we're going to show you today. You're also going to have to consider about putting in other elements as well. So you're also going to have to consider to possibly putting in balance sheet items, and that gets really, really complicated. So again, just think about it from what it is you need to put in from there. Okay, for simplisticness, I know mine is over, but I'm going to put no for this one. And then basically you just need to answer these questions. So just read the questions, and if none of them apply, make sure you press none of them apply. So you need to go through each one of these and consider if they're actually relevant to you. Then you're going to give some description of the business, and you're going to say if there's any change to your address, and if your company started in that particular year, or if it's ceased, you're going to put that information in there as well. You're going to say what your year end is. Again, most of the time it's much more simple to put that 31st of 3rd 2020, but if you have got a different year end, then please, use that year. Then you get the option if you want to do it on cash basis or accrual basis. The nice thing about QuickBooks is you get to choose your reporting, and most of them default to accrual basis, so you don't want to be pressing yes to this one. So that's just going to make your life easier. But basically, for you as a simplistic way of doing it, you have the option to press yes. Now, cash basis basically means you're reporting it based on what's happening in your bank account, so money that's physically come in and out. For simplistic ways, it does make sense to use that as an option, but just remembering QuickBooks to make sure you've shown if you're doing it by accrual or cash basis. And again, I've got a video about that that's going to make that much more simplistic for you. Now all you've got to do is basically take the information from your profit and loss, and you've got to put it into here. And then here, you get to choose it as a single total value. Personally, if you do it as a single amount, only do that if you've got really, really small amount of expenses you're claiming for. If you have more detailed analysis that you've got through QuickBooks, it makes a lot more sense to push that into HMRC. One of the rules of thumb really is if you give HMRC more detail, then they're going to make a decision based on if they want to investigate you much more simple for them. If they can see how those expenses are broke down and they're comfortable with that, they won't look an inquiry or an investigation. If you just give them one figure and they've got to assess it based on that one figure, the likelihood of an investigation is going to increase because they've got nothing to base on what those expenses are based on. So for me, I'm going to do a detailed breakdown. When you do a detailed breakdown, it basically means you've got to put them into these categories. And that's where QuickBooks is really going to help. Because if we jump over to QuickBooks, we've already got most of these categories broken down for us. And all we need to do then is put them into the right boxes. Once you've gone through and put all of the items into HMRC from QuickBooks and from this report, your key item is you want to get back to this figure here. 64,719 is what you want to show as your net profit. Once you know that that figure agrees to that figure, you know everything's been put in correctly. And all you've got to do is go through. So cost of sales, that's already up here for me. That's 8063. You can even do a copy and paste exercise if that makes it easier for you. Now the only items you don't want to include in here and you want to exclude from that profit at this point in time is any assets you've bought. From an asset point of view, so if you've gone out and bought a computer equipment or anything like that, you should be including them in your balance sheet. If they're included in the balance sheet, then that's not going to affect your net profit at this point, so you're okay. But if you haven't included them in your balance sheet, then and you have included in your profit and loss, then all you need to do is not include them in this element of it. For more information about profit, for more information about assets, then we're going to include that in one of the upcoming videos. So again, subscribe, like, and we'll make sure that's done for you. Okay, once I've put all that information in, then basically, like I said, that net profit income figure there should agree to that net profit figure there. Once them to agree, I know I've put everything in, unless I've got any capital items. When I press save and continue, I'm then asked to put any of my capital items into it. Now for small businesses, most of the time you're able to utilize what's called your annual investment allowance. Now that's as of now, so these do change from time to time, but basically every time you buy an asset now, you get to include it in your annual investment allowance subject to the rules, so do have a look at the rules. And then once you do that, you get 100% of it now. So if I've gone and bought myself a new computer and I spent £1,000 on it, then I get to put that information into my annual investment allowance there and save and continue. The rest of these questions here are only applicable if you do a lot of buying and selling assets. So again, do look at it from do look at my upcoming video about that one. Keep it simple. The rest of the questions though, you've got any goods or services for own use. So that's if you have utilized any of those products. Then you get the option to look at seeing if there's any losses to bring forward. So if you made a loss in a previous year, you then get to utilize that loss in this year so that you don't have to pay the taxes. And then if there's any other business income, you get to put there, saving contingent. Then you get to talk about the losses one more time. So it's basically what you get to utilize those losses for if you have any losses. And then you get to say if you've had any. Now, unless you're in construction industry scheme, it's very unlikely you're going to have any taxes deducted at source. So normally at this point, you won't have to say yes. If you are in the construction industry scheme though, this is where you get to state how much tax you've already suffered and therefore you've already paid over to HMRC. Then you get to say if you're exempt from class 4 NICs. Most of that is down to your age, so do look into the rules there. And then if there's any other information, you get to put there. Press save and continue. This page here, this summary, is the bit that you just need to doubly check on. This is where you get to refer back to QuickBooks, making sure that they all agree. So remember, your capital allowances may give you some issues, but apart from that, that profit and loss account we showed you, you should be coming back to that exact figure in this element. So if you showed a profit figure of 29,636 like my example shows, then that's it, you're spot on. If not, you might want to go through and just check those workings. I would always take a print of this page as well. This is your option then to save it with the rest of those options or the rest of those items that we've talked about saving before, and that's going to be useful for keeping records. Save and continue. And that's it, that's completing the return based on your self-assessment. Now remember, you may have other items to include there. There might be rental, there might be other things. For those other elements, I will be looking at putting videos out there as well. So if you do have them as well, we can look at bringing those in and we can look at putting them in together. Or look at my other channel, Boffix Tax Tips. Over there, we're going to be able to explain to you as well how to put that information in, or how we as an accountant could do that for you really cost effective. Over at Boffix, we could do a tax return for £10 per month. So, you know, that's going to give you a lot more confidence in the fact that you're putting everything in the right place. The rest of the information you're going to fill out there is all based on what you've tailored, and also just looking at to see if you've got any exemptions or any other taxable elements of it. Again, we're going to go through and look at that in more detail in another video. This video is purely about taking the information from QuickBooks and put it into your tax return. So at this point, you should have all you need, especially if you've already completed a tax return, to be able to now complete your next tax return based on the information from QuickBooks themselves. An example of that is you'd have to fill in if there's any overpaid tax, if you had a tax advisor like myself, or if you've got anything else going from there. Once you're happy with that, you press next, and then you go through to submitting it. But again, make sure you keep hold of those records that you've got. Put them somewhere safe so that you can always go back to them if you need to. And there we have it. We've taken the information we've got from QuickBooks and we've put them directly into HMRC for your tax return. Hopefully you can see that it isn't as daunting as it looks. And although QuickBooks Self-Employed has that way of doing it for you in the product, it's not something you necessarily 100% need. So doing it this way means that you can quickly get that tax return completed. You know how much tax you've got to pay, and then you can make sure you're on top of it from your business point of view. As always, if you've got any questions on this at all, please use that comment box below to have a shout at me. Let me know if there's anything we can help you out on. Also, don't forget to look at Boffix Tax Tips. That's also a great resource in terms of YouTube on making sure you're getting the most out of your business and you're claiming for the right things at the right time. And if you do need any accounting advice, then obviously hit myself up or Boffix themselves and we can make sure you're looked after. If you are looking to get QuickBooks as well, do make sure you don't pay QuickBooks themselves. Come talk to us, we can make sure you can get a cracking deal. And then also make sure that you like and subscribe this video, and then we can make sure we can bring out more content like this to make sure your business is being done correctly and make sure you're saving money as you go along. I've been Aaron Patrick, it's been my pleasure to do this video for you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.
I told him I can be a fighter if you want. I'll be there to catch you if you fall. I can make it brighter when it starts. I told him I would do it all for you, and I know you do it for me too. I can be a fighter if you want, if you want. I can be a fighter. I can be a fighter if you want. I can be a fighter if you want. All the way that I feel, yeah, I know that it's real, cause I can get him out of my head. I don't care what we do, everything's feeling new. Even if we stay in bed, my heart is saying yeah, 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 yeah. You know I want him, nah, 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 nah. My heart is saying yeah, 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 yeah.